What's up YouTube, Carboss here, back in another video where I talk about cards, money investing. In today's video, I'm going to discuss a concept that's probably not new, but I tend to recognize it as an official strategy when it comes to card investing, be it sports, Marvel or F1. And the concept I'm referring to is stashing or keeping something for the future. In this case, I'm going to expand that concept a bit further to what I call the 3S, i.e. scoop, stash, and sell. I'm going to talk about the core concept, which is stash first. And a lot of us are familiar with this concept of stashing or keeping cards aside, which we have prospected, speculated, or whatever term that you guys are using, to identify what is possibly the next big player or character that will blow up in the near future. However, most of the time people tend to follow what's being hyped or make somewhat of an educated guess to predict what might happen. Of course, no one can effectively predict the outcomes with great certainty, and I think in the past, most people have gotten more wrongs than right. But experts will tell you that it's a law of averages, that out of so many that you're prospecting or predicting, there's bound to be one that eventually will pan out. And that comes to the two core issues, how and when. So setting aside hype and what you watch on YouTube and social media, you have to really take the time to research on these individual prospects and why you think that it could be the next big thing. It's obvious to say that someone has all the star potential or is coming out in the next MCU movie, but I think it has to come with more facts than just what I think. And of course, I'll touch on some examples later. And the second point is timing. People on YouTube can use the words eventually or the next 2 to 5 years, and that's all vague and safe. But when it comes to investing, you have to try to best to pinpoint with some element of certainty. Again, external forces, can just flip the table over. And when I mean external forces, I'm not just referring to the general economic conditions or the pandemic, but things like injuries, licensing issues, whatever. So things that generally outside the control of the performance of that player or the character. But for me, timing is key, and I always try not to look beyond 12 to 15 months, with exception of legends or goats, where those are a different class on their own. So let's say you got all that figured out, and now comes to the scoping part. When you execute a strategy like this, I notice some people would just take another conservative approach of picking one or two cards, sort of a hedge or a small betting chip. Nothing wrong with that. But in a scoop and stash strategy, to really maximize your future returns, you have to do a lot more than just one or two cards. And that's diving in with a shovel rather than a spoon. Risky? Sure it is. But that's what I talked about earlier on doing the necessary research in advance on the hows and the whens to minimize that risk. The next question would then arise to be, how much capital do you dedicate to such a strategy? And of course, this is quite subjective to the individual. But personally, I wouldn't dedicate more than 10 to 20% of my entire portfolio value to this strategy. Not because I don't believe in it, but it means that it's 20% of your portfolio value gets tied up for at least 12 months. And for those who follow my channel closely, I'm a huge advocate for cash flow and capital flexibility. So having your capital tied up for extended period of time is not usually what I normally recommend. But smart investing usually calls for some portion of your portfolio to be tied up. And do remember, right? So while 20% is being tied up for this reason, it doesn't represent your overall long-term portfolio allocation, because there would be an allocation for further long-term investing, i.e. those 3 to 5 years whereby these are your goals. And for me, that's another, 15 to 20%. So totality, you have close to 40% of your capital locked up, which is pretty much the max I would consider, And next would be, what kind of cards do you scoop up? I still go back to the basic fundamentals of sticking to core cards of that player or that character. What would be popular and in demand today, which would definitely translate to being popular and in demand in the future. So I tend to stay away from super high-end or obscure cards for two reasons. One, these are extremely capital intensive for those super high-end cards, and that alone would eat most of your cap space. And two, diversity. Smaller and more agile pieces, which may not translate to huge gains, which gives you more angle and flexibility, as well as appeal to a broader audience down the line. And in line with those principles of scooping with a shovel, you want to pick up as many cards as possible within your capital budget and as quick as possible. Cards that fall into this category would be rookie cards, but not base cards, right? And core inserts, parallels, serial number cards. You guys get the idea. And the final point is sell. People think selling is easy, but it's a lot harder than it seems. And people don't talk about selling as much as what they are buying, because it's actually that hard. I discussed the outputs in my Biden numbers segment, and I think there is not enough content out there on the selling aspect of card investing. And to me, that's actually dangerous for people who are new to this and just coming in. And for the scoop, stash, and sell strategy, selling becomes even more focused when the market is trending because don't forget, this only represents a small fragment of your portfolio, and regardless of the overall size of it or how many cards you have or how much dollars you put in, the overall population is still vast, and there'll be hundreds of people competing to liquidate the positions, at that point in time. So you got to be ready, agile, and be able to move quick to the market. Figure out the right pricing, the right platforms. Because if you're a step behind, you lose a lot of equity very, very quickly. And I'll probably have a selling video later on to talk about this more. And so you now have got the concepts. Let's talk about some examples and what are my picks. Some are pretty obvious and some less so. So first up, Zion Williamson. So Zion, as most of you know, missed the entire last season, was declared it was good to go when the NBA playoffs were roaring after his Pelicans were already bounced off. No publicity or whatnot, but Zion probably had his time to rest and recover. His cards have fallen off a cliff in the last 12 months. Some people worry about the long-term severity of his injury. Some are just frustrated, or some people just don't believe in the Zion mania anymore. But truth be told, he is a monster talent. We just only caught a glimpse of his potential and skill set, and there's more to come. I really think so. Despite all the massive sell-off, before and during the season, the available inventory on Zion core cards are actually quite scarce, right? People who are already underwater on his cards since the beginning of last year simply don't want to take huge losses, and that's quite normal. But for those who chose to sell, savvy investors were scooping up whatever they could get their hands on, and it's likely in a few months' time, these efforts, that started like 9 months ago, would pay dividends. Will the market stay conservative due to its likelihood for injury again? Sure. But I can foresee a blitzing start when training camp reopens, and if you are profiting, then you might want to cash out on some of your positions because that's exactly the timing you are waiting for. So Zion is the past. Let's talk about the present. How about Wolverine? But wait, top 3 Marvel character is in the list of spec and stash. What gives? Well, Wolverine already has an absurd number of fans and collectors, so it's unusual to consider him as an investment spec compared to how you look at Zion or my third example later. But Wolverine, while a well-known and popular character on the screen, he has a huge upside of creating new fans for his collectibles cards especially. And I think we saw that effect firsthand with Moon Knight and Doctor Strange, where card prices for these two characters went crazy. And it's not that it's the Marvel fans that suddenly became fans of Moon Knight or Doctor Strange, but new fans, hobbyists, and collectors entering the space as a result of these characters dropping in live action. Wolverine, through Hugh Jackman, has done wonders, but that feels like a lifetime ago. And from what you can see, the effects of MCU creates a huge surge in card collecting, which we can see the renewed interest in the last 18 months. Wolverine, such a huge character, and the artwork has been extremely good throughout the years. A lot of fans didn't recognize this before, but will recognize this down the line. Marvel card collecting is mainstream now, and Wolverine down the road will be the next one to solidify its place among the ranks of sports cards. And finally, I have to touch on F1. Now, compared to sports and Marvel, I find F1 so much more predictable as a market. And I do agree that the card market cap and collector base are indeed much smaller compared to the other two markets, but the plays are so much simpler. And if you spend the time to research the sport, and I mean research the ins and outs of the sport, you understand what I'm talking about. It's not just as simple as just 20 drivers racing for the checkered flag. The sport is actually quite lopsided, and through that, it makes things quite predictable. But I'm not going to delve into that and instead talk about the prospect on the headlines recently, and that's Pierre Gasly. The 26-year-old driver for AlphaTauri recently announced that he'll be staying with the team for the rest of the 2023 season, quashing any rumors of him being promoted to the affiliated first team of Red Bull, presumably next to the current world champion and the front runner to another championship, which is Max Verstappen. From the start, there was heavy speculation on that move happening this season, and that drew a lot of interest to his cards. But now there's confirmed that this move is shelved for at least another full season. Gasly will likely have to settle in the middle of the pack behind the big three of Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes. But that's not stopping the potential upside of this talented driver. Everyone knows he has the talent, but just need the right fit and the right car. And we've seen what a promotion can do, right, for a driver in terms of popularity. That also translates to his cards, where you can take examples from George Russell and to some extent Lando Norris. So for those who believe in Gasly from the start of the season, me included, will continue to farm this prospect. Now, his cards are considered low when you compare to the likes of other big name drivers, and some may debate that other middle pack drivers like Albon or Ocon have similar potentials, but there's no denying Gasly's current popularity, and that's a good sign from investment potential in my opinion. Low risk, high upside, but you just gotta need to be patient. Overall, general environment across all markets seem to be a bit wobbly at the moment, and that's a product of uncertain times. The National Card Convention is still happening in a month's time, so we'll see if a lot of money changes hands in that massive weekend. For now, I think smaller calculated steps is necessary to get the best value of your capital. Alright, that's what I got for today. Like and subscribe to this channel for more content, sports, Marvel, and F1. Till the next one, Carbo's out.